It's been a dream to join the MCU. The movie is called The Fantastic Four. I'll confess, I did all my stretching for...
Pascal is getting very defensive. He's getting very much, of course, vocal toward the critics, toward Marvel fans, blaming everything on Trump, blaming everything on MAGA and Trump supporters again.
Sometimes I felt like I was in a Reed Richards science class, which is not what I really wanted to be in.
Pedro Pascal is firing back. He's getting very tired of...
Look, this is not a life-changing, the MCU has been saved, this movie paid off my car, this movie cured my depression. It's not that. It's really not.
And now you got Disney CEO Bob Iger only making matters worse.
Pedro Pascal was supposed to save Marvel, not just headline another superhero movie, but revive an empire. The Fantastic Four reboot was Marvel's billion-dollar reset button, a desperate attempt to break free from streaming oversaturation, box office fatigue, and years of forgettable releases. And leading the charge? Pedro, the man who carried entire universes on his back, the quiet force behind The Mandalorian, the emotional core of The Last of Us. So when Marvel handed him Reed Richards, the tortured genius and beating heart of the Fantastic Four, it was more than a casting choice. It was a crown. But behind the scenes, the man they hoped would rebuild Marvel may have burned it to the ground. From explosive rehearsals to a table-read disaster that shattered the cast dynamic, sources say Pedro didn't just derail the film, he may have become the reason it never got made. And now, the movie's scrapped, the cast has vanished, and Hollywood is quietly turning its back on one of its biggest stars. So, how did Pedro Pascal go from Marvel's golden hope to the symbol of its biggest creative collapse? Let's break it down.
Disney and Marvel Studios, they went into panic mode, they went into damage control mode, over, of course, all the Hollywood trades talking about this. Box office metrics for the Fantastic Four First Steps now sitting at $367 million worldwide, and actually going through a 66% drop, globally speaking.
Marvel was out of options. After the fatigue of Eternals, the confusion of Multiverse of Madness, and the streaming chaos of Disney+, fans were done. The excitement was gone. The box office magic had evaporated. They needed something bold, something iconic to reset the franchise. Enter Fantastic Four. The announcement sent shockwaves. This wasn't just another reboot. This was the reboot, the one meant to bring back legacy fans, ignite new hype, and finally give the MCU a fresh foundation. And Pedro Pascal was the crown jewel. The casting felt perfect. Reed Richards, brilliant, haunted, self-destructive, was tailor-made for Pascal's range. Add in a dream cast with Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, and Eben Moss-Backrack, and Marvel finally had their next phase one. But while the internet celebrated, the production was already starting to fall apart. Behind the smiles and press releases, insiders say tension began the moment rehearsals started. And it wasn't minor. It was war. At first, no one saw it coming. Rehearsals were closed, scripts were locked. Marvel was doing what it always did: control everything, polish the narrative, and keep the brand spotless. But what started as minor creative notes quickly snowballed into something bigger. Sources say Pedro began rewriting scenes, not just adjusting lines, but reshaping the entire story. What was supposed to be a team-based film slowly turned into what one crew member called Pedro's Reed Richards therapy hour. The emotional core shifted. The pacing changed. Supporting characters, Sue, Johnny, Ben, all got sidelined. And it wasn't subtle, it was calculated. He allegedly pushed Reed's trauma to the front, reframed the tone into something far more personal, and made himself the gravitational center of every major moment. At first, the cast played along. Maybe he was just passionate, but passion turned to dominance. Feedback turned into resistance, and collaboration turned into control. And the final table read, that's where everything exploded. The table read was supposed to be electric. This is where Marvel magic usually happens. Chemistry syncing, jokes landing, energy bouncing between actors. But on this day, something felt off. Pedro walked in with a marked up script. Not just notes, full rewrites. Entire scenes were crossed out. New monologues were scribbled in the margins. Dialogue was rearranged. And everything now revolved around Reed Richards' trauma, genius, and emotional breakdown. The rest of the cast? Blindsided. They laughed at first, thought it was a prank, but then Pedro started reading his new version. Out loud. No warning, no approvals, just full takeover. Matt Shakman, the director, reportedly tried to steer it back, reminded Pedro this wasn't the agreed script, but Pascal didn't flinch. He pushed harder, cut off feedback, reclaimed scenes. At one point, when questioned, he allegedly snapped, "If this is just going to be another cookie-cutter Marvel flick, then I'm wasting my time." Silence. The room went cold. Vanessa Kirby reportedly froze, arms crossed. Joseph Quinn just stunned. Eben Moss-Bachrach shook his head in disbelief. No one yelled, no one fought. They just stood up and left. Not a storm out, no drama, just a quiet, coordinated exit, the kind that says, "We're done here." And from that moment on, Marvel wasn't planning a movie. They were preparing for a crisis. Marvel expected disagreements. They'd dealt with egos before. But this wasn't creative tension. It was a silent rebellion. After that table read, the cast didn't post cryptic tweets. They didn't leak to TMZ. They simply stopped showing up. Vanessa Kirby, gone. Joseph Quinn, disappeared. Eben Moss-Bachrach, no contact. It wasn't loud. It was cold. And in Hollywood, that's deadlier than a public feud. Disney executives were blindsided. What was supposed to be Phase 5's crown jewel was now a smoldering ruin. The phone lines lit up. Crisis meetings filled every available room. Marvel had always been able to fix things with rewrites, reshoots, or PR spin, but this time, the damage wasn't to the film, it was to trust. And the deeper they dug, the more they realized. This collapse wasn't a single bad day. It had been building for weeks. Behind closed doors, Pedro's influence had spread far beyond the script. It started with small tweaks to Reed Richards' dialogue, then snowballed into major scene restructures. Moments written for Sue Storm, redirected to Reed's emotional breakdown. Johnny's comic relief, muted. Ben Grimm's emotional gravitas, buried under more Reed-centric storytelling, but he didn't stop at the words on the page. Costume designs? He had notes. Lighting setups? He wanted changes. Camera angles, background dialogue, even the way props were placed, all filtered through Pedro's vision. He didn't just want to play Reed Richards, one crew member revealed. He wanted to be Reed Richards, the center of the film, the center of the set, the center of Marvel's entire future. Director Matt Shakman, who had managed chaos before on WandaVision, tried to keep the project balanced. But insiders say every attempt at compromise was met with philosophical resistance. Pedro reportedly claimed Marvel's formula was tired and that this film had to mean something. To some, it sounded visionary. To others, it sounded like ego wearing a mask. If the tension had stayed behind closed doors, maybe Marvel could have contained it. But soon, it was visible to the world. The press tour for the early promotional phase was supposed to show unity and excitement. Instead, it became a minefield of awkward moments. Pedro dominated every interview, steering conversations back to Reed Richards' trauma and the symbolic meaning of the character. It stopped feeling like a Marvel hype tour and started feeling like a one-man lecture series. Vanessa Kirby's polite smile looked tighter with each question. Joseph Quinn cracked a nervous joke. "He won't leave me alone," that fans later dissected frame by frame. One clip exploded on Reddit. Vanessa speaking mid-answer, Pedro interrupting her to wax poetic about superhero morality. She leaned back, visibly annoyed. Joseph gave her a sideways look and muttered, "Yikes." Even Eben Moss-Bachrach, normally unshakable, was caught shaking his head as Pedro launched into another monologue. The internet noticed. The memes started. PR control measures went into overdrive, restricted topics, shorter interviews, tightly moderated panels. But by then, the mask had slipped. Fans weren't buying the happy cast act anymore. And for Marvel, the problem wasn't just that Fantastic Four was in trouble. The problem was that everyone knew it. Marvel had one last card to play, a private video call insiders now call the Hail Mary Zoom. No executives, no PR handlers, just the original cast, director Matt Shakman and Pedro Pascal. One final chance to salvage the chemistry before cameras rolled. The tone, tense but hopeful. Cameras on, mics unmuted. Then, Pedro began, "No greetings, no, let's talk this through." Instead, a 20-minute monologue about what Fantastic Four should symbolize, how Reed Richards' arc should carry the film, and why Marvel's storytelling needed a revolution. He even quoted Stan Lee, claiming his vision was truer to the original intent than the script they had all agreed on. Vanessa Kirby tried to respond, calm, measured, respectful, but Pedro cut her off mid-sentence. "It's not about hierarchy, Vanessa. It's about message." That was it. Joseph Quinn quietly left the call without a word. Vanessa followed, Within minutes, most of the cast had logged off. By the end, Pedro was still talking, to a handful of stunned faces. The decision was made that night. The original cast was finished. Fantastic Four, at least this version, was dead before filming began. The moment Marvel went quiet, fans went digging. On Reddit, deep dive threads broke down every awkward interview clip, every weird pause, every subtle glare between cast members. TikTok flooded with fan theories about what really went down. Twitter turned into a live crime scene investigation. The narrative shifted. This wasn't just a movie delay, it was a collapse of trust between the cast, the studio, and the audience. Meanwhile, the former cast was thriving. Vanessa Kirby landed a lead role in Christopher Nolan's next film. Joseph Quinn signed a multi-picture deal with Warner Brothers. Ebon Moss-Bachrach jumped into a prestige A24 project. None of them mentioned Fantastic Four. Not a word, not even a hint. But that silence? Deafening. Insiders say Disney even tried quiet feelers, private calls offering a second chance. The response was unanimous. No. By this point, it wasn't just about Pedro Pascal, or even about Fantastic Four. It was about control. Who really decides the story on screen? The visionary actor who wants more depth? The billion-dollar studio playing it safe? Or the fans, who can now watch the collapse in real time? Pedro may have believed he was elevating the film. Marvel believed they could fix the mess behind closed doors. The cast believed until they didn't. Now, Marvel's most hyped film has turned into a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the biggest franchise in the world isn't immune to ego, miscalculation, and total meltdown. Pedro Pascal was supposed to be the face of Marvel's future. Instead, he's now the face of its most infamous behind-the-scenes disaster. A cast walked, a movie collapsed, and a brand bled, publicly, quietly, and completely. So was Pedro Pascal a misunderstood artist fighting for something better, or an unchecked ego who destroyed the very thing he was hired to save? One thing's for sure, this isn't over. Because when the superhero story becomes the scandal, that's when the real drama begins.